Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Strategy and Technology, a Practical Primer. We are in week 11 with the theme of Technology and Business. In this lecture, the 53rd in the series, we discuss the topic of retrofuturism. Retro design is not a new occurrence. In the field of fashion and accessories, cyclical emergence and re-emergence of trends is commonplace. Apple iPhone is an example of a phased-out product making a strong comeback, with a touch of contemporary styling and a combination of advanced hardware and software. When I talk about Apple iPhone, I especially talk about iPhone SE. Retrofuturism creates new product market spaces in a matrix of incremental and replacement demand from existing and competitor customers. This requires an integrated approach to product development and manufacture, as well as product positioning and marketing. A retrofuturistic firm has an exceptional ability to drive additional growth that is not within the scope of conventional firms. Retrofuturism, like everything modern, has to be planned for meticulously to ensure seamless integration. Retro design is based on the principle that nostalgia plays a role in retaining past customer loyalties and in evoking latent demand. In respect of industrial and consumer products, retro themes are reborn, usually decades later, particularly based on niche positioning. Below are a few examples. Vinyl gramophone records went out of use in the 1970s with the emergence of electronic storage and playback devices. Re-emergence of vinyl records in the 2020s is an example of classic vintage style staging a comeback. With the emergence of digital technologies, miniaturization and minimalist form factor have emerged as one-way development in a host of electromechanical and electronic products. The smaller the better principle has been reversed with the emergence of large-screen smartphones, usually screen sizes of 4.5 to 5.5 inches, and larger screen smartphones called phablets, usually screen sizes of 5.5 to 6.5 inches. I have given in the images 3 examples of retrofuturistic designs. The first one is the rechargeable lamp. This has been done as per the styling of the good old lantern. The next one is the land phone, which is digitally enabled. And the third one, of course the most famous one, is that of Beetle car. Generations have changed, but Beetle car retains its appeal. It's a combination of nostalgia and modernity. There have not been many retro cases, but more of reforming diverse design options with superior digital technologies. Steve Jobs, the late founder and CEO of Apple Inc., was a visionary product conceptualizer and developer. His iPod and iPhone devices revolutionized the era of palm-held devices. With the launch of the original iPhone in 2007, the real evolution of smartphones started. The first iPhone had a screen size of just 3.5 inches. Jobs never believed in large-sized phones. He always believed that the customers liked a screen size of 3.5 inches because the device would fit nicely into the palm of a user. Although other manufacturers popularized larger screen sizes, Steve Jobs resisted the temptation to go higher in terms of screen sizes. In fact, Apple stuck with the first iPhone's 3.5-inch screen until late 2012. That saw the launch of iPhone 5. And even then, the increase was only to the relatively small size of 4 inches. After the takeover of the CEO position by Tim Cook, the screens had a real bump up to 4.7 and 5.5 inches screen size with iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus respectively. That happened in 2015. That move, however, received both qualitative and quantitative appreciation. The graphics here represent iPhone with 3.5-inch screen size and iPhone SE, the first generation. As was the wont with Apple, the emergence of large screen phones saw the phase out of the earlier smaller screen models. Apple sprang a surprise later by bringing back its 4-inch iPhone 5 as Apple SE. signifying on the face of it one of the most dramatic retro returns of all time, particularly in this kind of products. The earlier perception was that it was intended as an option to address mid-range price point, especially in emerging markets such as India and China. However, the announced pricing of Rs 39,000 for the 16 GB version and Rs 49,000 for the 64 GB version defy that assumption, because with that pricing, SE became as pricey as the larger siblings. Apple SE phone actually brings out certain interesting lessons. First, the profile of Apple SE packs the contemporary iPhone 6s and 6 Plus designs in the 4-inch form factor. By featuring the latest A9 chip as available at that time, iOS 9.3, 12 megapixel camera, 4K video, retina display, Siri, and features such as live photos and night shift. In terms of body materials too, finishes and color options as well, it matches the latest generation iPhones. Users and expert reviewers alike vouch that Apple SE combined tradition and modernity in an eclectic balance. At one level, Apple SE may be seen to be following what Samsung or Nokia did in the mid-2010s, offering different products in different form factors and different price points. However, there is one important difference. Samsung brought in different products with different specifications. Moreover, in their case, lower position products had lower specifications invariably, whereas Apple SE offered the near best of specifications that Apple had, but in a retro form factor. There was nothing retrograde or regressive on its form factor and finish either. Both were looking very classy. It represented what Apple always represented, a combination of the top-end hardware and software, a combination of style and substance. The logic and rationale behind Apple SE, the first retro revival in the smartphone industry, have important considerations which are relevant not only for smartphones and other electronic devices but also for other products. That is the gist of style and substance. Ever since the launch in June 2007 of the first generation iPhone, Apple sold over 820 million iPhones of successive generations till 2010, that is in just 3 years. Of this, over 60% belonged to iPhone 5 4-inch screen or earlier generations 3.5-inch screen. Though Apple began introducing phones of larger display size from 2015, nostalgia for small phones remained. Typically, small phones have 1.3 GHz dual-core A6 or the earlier generation single-core processor, 1 GB RAM and below, as low as 128 MB RAM, iOS 6 or earlier OS versions, and an 8 MP or lower MP, at times as low as 2 MP primary cameras, as well as internal storage as low as 16 GB. Thus, they compare poorly in retrospect with the latest generation iPhones, not unnaturally, sporting high-end specifications like dual-core 1.84 GHz processor, 2 GB RAM, iOS 9.3 and 12 MP primary camera, as well as internal storage as high as 128 GB. More than just specifications, it is the overall user experience that took a quantum jump over the last 2 iterations of iPhone of larger screen sizes 4.7 and 5.5 inches. The launch of iPhone SE is more than an admission that an overwhelming proportion of Apple iPhone users are still comfortable with small size iPhones that can be held conveniently in the palm. Apple iPhone SE thus is a phone that brings back reminiscences and nostalgia to early Apple users. They liked the small phones, and more importantly, they liked the fact that this phone encouraged them to upgrade to newer and smoother user feel without the loss of the nostalgia. Apple's once expressed philosophy that the average expected life of iPhone is only 3 years is indicative of a larger strategy of Apple to hold its loyal base fully secured to itself. But the earlier chassis continued to be seen as elegant as it was a few years ago, This is a proof that deployment of design and manufacture of high standards leads to sustainable product strategies based on the retro designs in the future. Style is not a common factor with substance. Style is seen to be a cosmetic factor, whereas substance is seen to be in terms of hardware. However, the truth is that both style and substance depend on high level of material and manufacturing capability. We require for good styling high quality materials and high quality finishes, and therefore style is same as substance and vice versa. In sum, iPhone SE represents a coherent product initiative with demand management at its core. More importantly, it has implications applicable across all products for retrofuturism. That is, bring back the demand that belonged to a particular product profile. The demand for product is driven as much by product innovation as by customer population. Demand for any product has two basic components, one incremental demand and the other replacement demand. Both may again arise from own customer base and competitor customer base. Incremental demand happens when a product naive customer, that is a customer who never used a smartphone or an automobile, buys such a product. Incremental demand also happens when an existing user of the product buys the same product or its variant from the same company for use by other members of his family or friends. That is incremental demand. Replacement demand happens when the user of an existing product desires to upgrade the current product with the purchase of a new product. The larger the population of products in use and the more novel the new products are, the greater the replacement demand. Typically, the replacement demand occurs in a sequential manner within the same product family or within the same company offerings. The overall demand in growth-oriented economies tends to have an expanding canvas driven by both the incremental demand and the replacement demand. These combinations of incremental and replacement demand with own product and competitor product spaces will lead us to four unique demand positioning. 1. Incremental demand from product naive or existing customer, and incremental demand from existing customers. This leads to a situation where existing customers keep demanding newer products based on the products that they already have. On the other hand, there could be incremental demand from competitors' customers. That is, people have been used to your competitors' products, but based on customer service or some other factor, there would be incremental demand from competitor products. Third, replacement demand from existing customers. That is, the products that are used by the existing customers are due for replacement, and therefore there is a very logical replacement demand that arises. The fourth one is the replacement demand from competitor customers. That is, the competitors' customers are wanting to replace their products. Logically, they should be replacing from their own competitor product basis, but they choose to have the replacement demand met by your company's demand. A certain portion of each demand position will be catered to by retrofuturistic products, because the logical movement of the demand patterns, that is, incremental demand from existing customer, incremental demand from competitors' customers, replacement demand from existing customers, and replacement demand from competitors' customers. All of these things will be influenced to an extent by retrofuturistic products, because it provides a sense of novelty, a sense of going back to the nostalgic era. Development of retro products for this will require synthesis of the needs of different market segments as highlighted. Apple, as one knows, is extremely strong in IDEC and RDEC segments. Incremental demand from existing customer and replacement demand from existing customers. That is, Apple customers swear by Apple, and they, without doubt, take incremental demand for the families, for the friends. They also ensure replacement demand for their own Apple products. There is no doubt about it. However, Apple iPhone SE does more than that. It helps the company consolidate its hold in these two segments even to a greater extent, because given the superior technology it has deployed in the compact smartphone segment, it has enhanced the chances of winning customers from the competitors' fold. The new phone is the first open admission that demand need not and will not necessarily migrate to different product segments just because of a market leader's phase-in and phase-out policy. As the user base exponentially grows, a broad-based product strategy is vital for comprehensive and effective demand management. Even then, it is still less than what a mighty designer and manufacturer like Apple could do to address all of the potential customer universe. For example, iPhone SE in its first generation sported the rather primitive 1.2 megapixel front camera for selfies, when the prevailing trend was for at least 5 to 16 MP in the front. And that was expected to please the selfie enthusiasts of the new generation phones. However, Apple SE stuck to the primitive 1.2 megapixel front camera. This could partly be ascribed to the technological accuracy and technological behavior which even great firms such as Apple display at times. What is retrofuturism then? A firm which has an integrated approach to product development and manufacture as well as product positioning and marketing would have an exceptional ability to drive growth based on retrofuturism. Apple iPhone SE, whether so intended or not by Tim Cook and his team, provides us a platform to analyze retrofuturism. This retrofuturism develops an integrated strategy having 5 essential elements. The first element is that a product should be developed with a state of elegance that would enable it to qualify itself as a new product even years later. That is, the design and development as well as the finishes on the product should be so good that even after 5 or 6 years, the product should look contemporary. That is the fundamental design. So, futuristic design is essential for that to qualify as a retrofuturistic product years later. Recalling a retro design must be for reasons more than emotional or reminiscence reasons. It should bring in the latest technologies with the restored contours. Then only the nostalgia is combined with modernity, creating additional demand. The higher the size of the industry market base and its growth rate, the greater is the potential for retrofuturistic products. Retrofuturism is not about using old dice, molds or chassis for cheap products, but is more about creating superior products with re-optimized cost and technology balance. Importantly, retrofuturism should never be just mix and match or just mere refurbishment. It must be focused on reinventing the old into a contemporaneously relevant new, without compromising the nostalgia of the old. Not every product will lend itself to retrofuturism, yet when it is conceptualized beforehand, the promise can be realized. There are some examples of retrofuturism. Tata Motors had a uniquely Indian truck called semi-forward call truck. Retrofuturism would be an ideal application for SFC truck, which is still an attractive truck. Although full forward cowl vehicles have become the norm today, there is great possibility for Tata Motors to come back with an SFC truck which is redesigned for contemporary requirements in terms of power, torque and other gearbox options. It could also be fitted with digitized systems, because the nostalgia that is with semi-forward cowl design is pretty strong even now. The Western world is not so much used to the Indian ceiling fan concept, but it can be a great new market for ceiling fans, provided continuously variable and noise-free operation can be ensured by the Indian manufacturer. Indian jewelry houses can revitalize the royal ornamental designs with modern gold and diamond finishes and discover new global markets. With Mann Ki Baat being the communication medium for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the good old radio can take a new ubiquitous digital avatar. The vintage dialing telephone could become a new cellular communication system with all the capabilities of a new age smartphone built in. The possibilities for retrofuturism could be endless, but the key is to make every product as the legendary Steve Jobs did, with the best of design and manufacture that could last successive generations too. Let's look at vaccines. I am taking the case study of vaccines because that has been a product which has been there for several decades, but it has found immense utility and immense essentiality during the COVID times. COVID-19 has been one of a kind public health emergency. In a century of our generation and the previous generation, we haven't seen anything like COVID-19. Starting from a little noticed origin in October 2019, COVID-19 quickly engulfed the world. It became a highly transmissible pandemic by early 2020 with no known vaccine or cure. It became a multi-organ disease as well. It made it even more unpredictable in terms of its disease impact. The healthcare infrastructure got challenged as never before because there was no known treatment, no known prevention for COVID-19 virus. What happened over the last several months had no precedence also. Some examples. Drugs were immediately and urgently repurposed. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin are two such drugs. There were secondary treatments that were brought in terms of antibiotics and blood thinners. Existing antivirals that were purposed for certain other viral diseases were repurposed and reused for this purpose. Remdesivir sterile injection, favipiravir oral drug were such viral drugs. Cytokine storm preventers were used because treatment of COVID-19 resulted in cytokine storms. Therefore, conventional steroids and monoclonal steroids were used to abate cytokine storms. Critical care relied upon high-flow oxygen and plasma therapy. And finally, there were the new hopes, vaccines, antibody cocktails, new antivirals. The first five were ad hoc, knee-jerk reactions to the enveloping pandemic. Not all were correct and not all are being continued as part of the protocols now. But the new hopes, which were based on resurrection of the old or the good old vaccine concept, is the one which has saved the humanity from continued immersion by the pandemic. There have also been non-specific adjuncts such as vitamins and immunity boosters. There has been a global vaccine endeavor. This graphic succinctly tells us what vaccine development was being conducted. China had as many as 6 vaccine developments that were being done. Russia had 2. India had 2. Then Europe had got 1. Africa, that is the Middle East, had 2. Europe had 3. America had the maximum number of vaccines that were being developed. And some of them were modern technology vaccines such as mRNA vaccines. There was more than business in vaccine development. It was a social and corporate purpose. Governments targeted development vaccines and regulatory collaboration. Massive developmental grants were provided. Pharmaceutical industry energized vaccine development, which was going on a low base. Cross-border strategies and collaboration models were worked out very strongly. Academic bodies and R&D laboratories unlocked their academic research, started licensing vectors, and started sharing genome data. As a result, a number of new vaccines came up. Pfizer, Moderna, Gamaleya, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, Bharat-BioNTech, J&J, Novavax. They all had multiple vaccine development approaches. They secured fast-track clinical trials and regulatory approvals. Regulatory authorities started using the emergency use authorization route to get the vaccines into the marketplace, and governments played a very active and frontal role in procuring and administering the vaccines. There were also several strategic collaborations. Pharma corporations collaborated with academic bodies, startups, and R&D laboratories. Pfizer and BioNTech collaborated with each other. AstraZeneca collaborated with Jenner Institute, which is an arm of Oxford University. Moderna and National Institutes of Health collaborated. Bharat Biotech collaborated with ICMR in India. There were also strategic manufacturing collaborations. That is, pharma corporations reached out to each other and contract manufacturing organizations for global supplies. AstraZeneca reached out to Serum Institute of India for meeting its emerging market requirements. Novavax also reached out to Serum Institute of India. J&J with biological Levance, Gamaleya with Dr. Reddy's Panacea, Stelis, Gland, etc. Therefore, there were multiple associations, multiple networks that were at play in developing the vaccines in the fastest possible time span. As I said, there were multiple technology platforms, although the mission was singular. mRNA was adopted by Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna. This was the first time that mRNA vaccine technology was deployed for commercial production on a mass scale. Adenovirus, a well-proven technique, was adopted by AstraZeneca and Gamaleya. Inactivated virus route was taken by Bharat Biotech, Sinovac, Beijing Institute, Wuhan Institute. Viral vector route was taken by J&J, Janssen. Recombinant nanoprotein particle route was taken by Novavax. Plasmid DNA route was taken by Zydus Cadila. Of this, it is a matter of pride that two Indian vaccine manufacturers developed their own indigenous vaccine that has been proved to be as efficacious and as effective as any other globally developed vaccine by advanced countries. There is one goal, different technology paths, I said. From an attenuated, that is weakened version of a common cold virus known as adenovirus, the immune system is prompted to start making antibodies, and it is primed to attack any coronavirus infection. With mRNA technology, the molecules in cells that control protein production are primed to teach the immune system to make coronavirus fighting antibodies. From the dead virus that is incapable of infecting people but still able to instruct the immune system, and with immune adjuvants, inactivated virus started acting effectively. All vaccines work by teaching the immune system to make antibodies against the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus. The antibodies attach to viral proteins such as the so-called spike proteins that stud its surface. What is interesting is that all the manufacturers worked at Operation Warp Speed and brought out a vaccine within 10 to 12 months. The timeline is self-explanatory. Everybody started almost at the same time, that is in January 2020. Phase 1-2 started within 6 months to 10 months thereafter. Phase 3 started within 6 months thereafter. The approvals started flowing in from December 2020, and the vaccines were put into human beings in January 2021. So there has been a history of record development of vaccines because of concerted action by various stakeholders. The Pfizer-BioNTech story was one of technology and conviction. BioNTech was dedicated to mRNA vaccine for several years, and its focus was on developing vaccines for cancer. However, it also noted the importance and the applicability of this vaccine technology through mRNA. Today, BioNTech is worth more than $29 billion, while it was just under $3.4 billion before the project started. BioNTech demonstrates the story of biotech startups specializing in futuristic genetic technologies, waiting patiently for years while refining the technology, losing millions of dollars only to deliver a blockbuster product in a momentous manner with the backing of Big Pharma. That has been the story of successful biotech firms, and BioNTech was a prime example of that. BioNTech and Pfizer had a very progressive collaboration. The husband and wife team behind BioNTech are both scientists. In 2001, they founded a pharmaceutical startup for developing the cancer drugs through ideal monoclonal antibodies. In 2008, they founded BioNTech along with Austrian cancer expert Christoph Huber. BioNTech at that point of time began focusing on mRNA technology of developing vaccines. The mRNA technology involves mRNA, the molecules in cells that control protein production, to teach the immune system to make coronavirus fighting antibodies. BioNTech has had a relationship with Pfizer since 2018, when the US drug giant agreed to pay the German company up to $425 million in an alliance to develop mRNA-based vaccines for the prevention of influenza. The vaccine requires ultra-cold storage up to -75 degrees centigrade and distribution, however. Oxford vaccine story was different. Originally developed by Jenner Institute of Oxford University in collaboration with AstraZeneca, Global Pharma MNC, and Serum Institute, India's largest vaccine manufacturer, and put in place with UK government support, the Oxford vaccine was the first pan-global development cum manufacturing collaboration of its kind. It was made from a weakened version of a common cold virus known as adenovirus from chimpanzees. It has been modified to look more like coronavirus, although it can't cause illness. When a vaccine is injected into a patient, it prompts the immune system to start making antibodies and primes it to attack any coronavirus infection. While BioNTech focused on mRNA technology, Oxford University used attenuated virus technology, which is more challenging than the traditional inactivated virus technology. It was developed quickly because Oxford University researchers had already done a lot of work on developing a vaccine which could be adapted to tackle different viruses. It was also stable at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade because vaccines for emerging markets were one of the primary targets of Oxford University. The Oxford vaccine story in fact dates back to the 1800s, when science combined with observational practice commenced an era of structured vaccination in the 1800s. Eminent research institutes and foundations created new scientific foundations for human well-being, and this is going to be a perpetual truth. If we have eminent research foundations, and when those scientific foundations create new foundations of science for human well-being, the human race will be protected and nurtured. In the Oxford vaccine case, scientists take genes for the spike protein on the surface of the coronavirus and put them into a harmless virus to make a vaccine, and this is injected into the patient. The vaccine enters the cells, which then start producing the spike protein. The body's immune system immediately reacts, produces antibodies, and activates T cells or the memory cells to destroy cells with the spike protein. If the patient later catches coronavirus, antibodies and T cells are triggered to fight the virus. So the antibody immunity rises, the body's capability to create more antibodies and fight the virus becomes very strong, which is why fully vaccinated people have had mild breakthrough infections and not full-blown coronavirus infections. The Covaxin story is quite different and is a matter of pride for India. Indian Council of Medical Research and the National Institute of Virology, Pune, had collaboration to have this virus vector. Bharat Biotech is an indigenous vaccine developer. Covaxin was the first and still the only indigenous COVID-19 vaccine from India. It is developed in collaboration with the ICMR and National Institute of Virology. This vaccine is developed using whole viron inactivated virus cell derived platform technology. Inactivated vaccines do not replicate and are therefore unlikely to revert and cause pathological effects. They contain dead viruses which are incapable of infecting people but still able to instruct the immune system to mount a defensive reaction against an infection. Covaxin team is also included along with immune potentiators, also known as vaccine adjuvants, which are added to the vaccine to increase and boost its immunogenicity. It is the well-established and time-tested platform in the world of vaccine technology. It is a vaccine with no sub-zero storage requirement, no reconstitution requirement, and ready-to-use liquid presentation in multi-dose vials stable at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. Krishna Yella and his wife are the founders of Pfizer-BioNTech and the brains behind this story. There has been one common vaccine corporate strategy adopted by so many companies with so many developmental platforms. First, develop effective vaccine, obtain national global approvals, manufacture maximum possible number of doses, collaborate for maximal vaccination spread and intensity across the globe. But all of these companies adopted varied business models. Pfizer completely self-funded itself. It had its own exclusive technology alliance with BioNTech. It did all of its manufacture by itself and remained focused on US and EU. Moderna was largely state-funded under the Operation Warp Speed, had largely owned technology. It outsourced its manufacture and it was essentially US focused. AstraZeneca also was largely self-funded. It had a technology alliance with Oxford University. However, it largely outsourced its manufacture and it was focused on EU and rest of the world. Bharat Biotech worked on a shoestring budget. It had shared technology with research laboratories of India. It relied on its own manufacture and it was India and rest of the world focused. Gamaleya was largely state-funded, had its own technology. It had its own plus outsourced technology for manufacture, and it was Russia and ROW focused. Serum Institute had the position as a global contract manufacturing organization. It could co-conduct India clinical trials. It was a qualified WHO and COVAX supplier, and its intention was to supply to India as well as the world markets. World Health Organization and COVAX, an alliance of multilateral agencies supplying vaccines for emerging markets, were the key customers apart from the national governments. The common factor for all of these business strategies and business models was marketing under national government policies and negotiations. In this, leadership at Pfizer has been phenomenal. If we have to identify leadership capability which combined the best of strategy and best of technology, Pfizer's leadership and that of Dr. Albert Bourla, Chairman and CEO of Pfizer Inc., can be considered as a role model. Fundamentally, it started with foresight. Pfizer identified and bet on mRNA technology several years ago. Ability to spot, better still, drive the mega trends and game changers of the future is exemplified by Pfizer foresight with reference to the mRNA technology. Second, the leadership showed persistence. The company maintained close corporate and professional relationship with BioNTech, the mRNA pioneer. Foresight requires conviction and persistence backed by dedication to succeed. Therefore, foresight, when combined with persistence, ensured that the chosen platform was available when the opportunity arose. The third one was complete grasp of the value chain requirements and complete management end-to-end of the value chain activities. Collaborated across the internal and external value chain for competency and capacity ramp-up. Ability to plan, synchronize and execute across the total value chain, including internal and external distribution and logistics partners, was critical to this transformation. Then agility, leadership drive, organizational process and employee ownership institutionalized agility. Pfizer displayed alacrity and agility to develop and produce a vaccine in just 9 months against the established norm of 9 years. And finally, courage. Demonstrated exceptional courage to forego billions of dollars of federal grants from the US government and go solo with self-funding. Demonstrated trust to work with BioNTech even without a legally binding agreement. It was signed only in January 2021 after the product was approved. Courage, including taking calculated risk, is the hallmark of transformational leadership at individual and corporate levels. Leadership at Pfizer, which was displayed in the case of vaccines, is a role model for leadership of technologically advanced product development and product manufacture, as well as putting them in the markets. Therefore, I thought it was appropriate to take the vaccines example and demonstrate to you a very good leadership model. But the story doesn't stop with just vaccines. Antibodies came in. People recognize that it is not always possible to completely prevent COVID-19. In fact, vaccines don't prevent, they only reduce the impact in terms of hospitalization. Clinical trials and usage experience suggest that specific antibody treatments administered as hospital infusions can prevent deaths and hospitalizations among people with mild or moderate COVID-19, particularly those who are at high risk of developing severe disease. It is also administered as prophylaxis for certain immunocompromised patients without COVID exposure. In November 2020, the US FDA gave EUA to Regeneron and Roche for casirivimab and imdevimab to be administered together for the treatment of mild to moderate COVID-19 in adults and pediatric patients. I spoke about monoclonal antibodies earlier and how the biology innovations created a totally new form of disease treatment. In November 20 itself, another cocktail of two antibodies, bamlanivimab and etesevimab, both made by Eli Lilly of Indianapolis, Indiana, was provided with emergency use authorization by US FDA. It was shown to cut the risk of hospitalization and death by 87%. In May 2021, US FDA issued another EUA for an antibody against the coronavirus developed by Vir Biotechnology in San Francisco. And GSK sotrovimab reduced the chance of hospitalization or death among participants by 85%. In December 2021, the US FDA granted EUA for AstraZeneca's Evusheld, tixagevimab, co-packaged with silgavimab and administered together for the pre-exposure prophylaxis, that is prevention of COVID-19 in certain adults and pediatric individuals, 12 years of age and older, weighing at least 40 kilograms. The study results of the antibody cocktails come from randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind clinical trials. Antibody cocktails have significant potential. Incidentally, one of these antibodies works very well against the Omicron variant, which is now transiting across the world at a very rapid pace. But again, this story doesn't stop with antibody cocktails. Companies started developing antiviral oral drugs. Merck and Ridgeback Therapeutics developed molnupiravir, whereas Pfizer developed Paxlovid. Merck drug reduces the risk of hospitalization or death by 50%, while Pfizer's is even more impactful. It reduces the risk of hospitalization or death by 89%. Both disrupt the replication of the virus in different ways, and they should be taken as soon as possible following testing positive for COVID-19. A key feature of both the drugs is that they can be taken orally, which sets them apart from other treatments being developed, such as monoclonal antibodies that need to be given via infusion or injection. With both antivirals, patient will be able to take them at home. Antivirals are difficult to develop, and successes such as the ones which I have highlighted are vital to stimulate innovation. We can expect a burst of investment into antiviral science and engineering off the back of these drugs. COVID virus, as World Health Organization says, is not the last of viruses which the mankind may have to face. There will be more viruses in future as well. So continued investments in science and technology should be part of strategy of any big corporation, should also be the strategy of any brilliant startup which is set to make its imprint in the pharmaceutical space. The relentless technological progress is reflective of the combination of strategy and technology. The efforts by the scientific and technological community and the governments the world over from 2020 onwards reflect how collective human endeavor can help humanity fight against COVID-19, one of the deadliest pandemics. So to recall whatever we have discussed, from early 2020 onwards, ever since the pandemic reared its head, we had repurposing of drugs, remdesivir, some existing drugs, and they were used to treat severe infections in hospital settings. In 2020 onwards, we started getting the new vaccines, custom designed for COVID-19 and developed within a record time of 9 months. These were the first essential line of defense, prevented infection through mass vaccination. In 2020 onwards, we also got antibody cocktails. They were immunity boosters, prevented severe illness and hospitalization, and administered as infusions in hospital settings. From mid-2021 onwards, we started getting oral antiviral drugs, more accessible treatment options, prescription medicines for hospital, clinic and home use at the onset of symptoms. Antivirals are difficult to develop, and successes such as these are vital to stimulate innovation. We should expect and we must aim at having investments into antiviral science and engineering off the back of these drugs. So, thank you for your attention. Look forward to meeting you very soon.